I'm definitely pro-American values in the sense that there's certain universal values of which the United States of America was the best representative of those. You know, fair play, equality under the law, rule of law. You know, abiding by contracts, treating people with all that type of stuff. You know, which has unfortunately, you're like, is that going away? It is unfortunately going away to some extent. You're getting more tribal. You're getting people mad at each other.
But we just moved here.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
But we moved here from Canada, where
you moved from Canada, right?
1 degree worse.
So in sort of the same way that torch was passed from, arguably, from Greece to Rome, and then after a long delay from like Rome to the UK and UK to the US, right? Like, and each person being an imperfect messenger. You know, there's I think the next torch pass is from the Americas to the internet. The internet is not the same as America. People think of it as the same, but it's really not the same. And in fact, in many ways, it's more. The internet is to the Americas what the Americas were to the old world of Europe. It is, for example, it's a more global kind of thing. There's more people there from all over the world. You go from common law of the UK to the Constitution of the US to the smart contract of the blockchain. You just get more precise about what you're doing, right? So it's both more capitalist and more inclusive. You know, so
it's like a new frontier kind of.
It's a new frontier, right? So it kind of, if you think it's like V3, right? And one way to think.
Wait, what's V3?
Just the third version.
Version 3. Okay.
Yeah, version 3.0.
I thought it was like, you know.
No, that's right. So it's not a podcast abbreviation. That's right. So, I mean, one way of thinking about that, I mentioned this, and it's something that most people don't have what we would call priced in, right? What is not priced in, for example, is the fact that the majority of English speakers online in the next 10 years or so are going to be Indian. Why? Because about 1 billion something Indians have just gotten online, and many Indians speak English, and many more are quickly learning English due to being online.
And Indians crush it.
Well, there's some Indians who are quite good. You know, I mean, not all, some are quite good. But the thing is that internet, unlike the Chinese internet, is not air-gapped from the American internet. The Chinese internet is its own world, right? Like, because of the Great Firewall, they've got a Galapagos Islands ecosystem where they've got different versions of everything, and things are, you know, you've got, you know, fish with feathers. Everything is like remixed.
All their own apps that are essentially like the apps we use, but just specifically like
though
like
it is
WeChat and stuff.
Like WeChat, but you know what's useful. There's a book called AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. Okay, it came out right before the pandemic. It's now about a few years old, but it'll give you a snapshot of this sort of Galapagos Islands ecosystem, where, for example, one of the biggest companies in China is like the Chinese version of Groupon. It's called Meituan, but it did a lot more. Imagine if Groupon executed extremely well. Right? Nothing against Groupon, but, you know, the American version did only like so. The Chinese version had like amazing will to power CEOs and, you know, or CEO and did extremely well.
That wasn't just a deal better?
It wasn't just deal better. They do a lot of other stuff, right?
Were they before Groupon or after?
I think they were at first a Groupon clone, but now they far
Groupon had
exceeded
like the
them.
most insane hype at the time. Everybody's like, what is this thing? And now it's like, yeah, I get $5 off of sandwich.
Some Broadway show I didn't even really want to go to.
But the thing
is, you couldn't even cash it in anymore.
Well, what's interesting though, Andrew Mason's original. I mean, look, it's hard to build a business and so on, and the fact that he got it to public is good. But yes, there was a huge amount of hype about it 10 years ago. But the entire concept of crowdfunding, having a crowdfunded deal tip over if you have enough collective action online. You know, Andrew Mason had started the thing as The Point, which was like this. Attempt to try to get people to cooperate online to do something together. What we found was that it was easiest to cooperate to get them to buy something at that time. Gotcha. That was like 10, 12 years ago. Perhaps you might be able to get them to cooperate to do something of more significance now today, 10, 12 years later, when there's a lot more tools that are being developed, you know? So, but to your point, right? So yes, I'm not that bullish on the particular state as a guarantor of those values, but I am bullish on those values. So how do we actually work around that? How do we actually, preserve some sort of global rule of law? You know, one way I put it, I had this article that came out in Foreign Policy a few months ago, and it's like, you know, the U.S. is less and less a guarantor of the rules-based order. China doesn't even pretend to be. You know, it is essentially just, it's self-interested for the Han, you know? You can do a deal with them.
Yeah, they're almost like kind of similar, but one's like, yeah, that's the deal, and the other's like, no, we're not like that.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I talked about how, you know, there's this weird convergence of the two things. You know, in China, they call it human flesh search, and here we call it cancellation. Okay,
They call that's what they call it there?
yeah, translate. Just think about what that sounds like. Right?
Do they call it human flesh search culture?
Well, no.
Oh, look at these comedians talking about human flesh search culture again.
Yeah, so human flesh search, basically, it's a very evocative term. It's like, there's this guy online, he said something wrong, and so then these...
When he went to Amsterdam, he said he was doing a bit of a human flesh.
Well, okay, sure. So this is a different version. So this is like... This is the unfun version, I guess. So basically, they find somebody saying something bad online, and then all of these Chinese netizens, their equivalent of 4chan, just goes and trawls through to find who this person is, where they are. It's like pawing through all of the flesh of all the humans to find that one person who said some thought crime, and then the whole internet piles on them, right?
That's what happened to Uncle Roger.
Yeah, I guess so.
Lots of people. I'm sure.
This comedian who was on our show, but the same thing happened. He said something about off color about Taiwan, like a joke or something.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And like he had a whole PR fiasco and.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So there's analogs of all this stuff on the Chinese internet, but it's often like the inverse. For example, you're not criticized for being too nationalist, but not for not being nationalist enough. Okay.
Yeah,
so
of course.
They have, in their own way, gone to this ultra right ethnic nationalist level since Xi Jinping took office. Just to quantify this, because it's less visible to us, being outside, on the order of 90% of like governors and so on in China were like replaced, like the Politburo, the Standing Committee. There's various facts and figures. I'll probably like tweet afterwards to get the exact numbers, but something that, if I recall correctly, like 57 out of 63 of a particular group were replaced by Xi Jinping going into like 2017.
Cleaned house,
right?
It's like sports.
Well, yeah, so about like 90% of people were just like replaced like this, and then you started really seeing the change in attitude where the sort of more quiet internationalist capitalist attitude of the Deng Jiang Hu era, those are like the three leaders of China prior to Xi Jinping. That kind of sort of quieter multilateralist, like we're just making stuff and selling it to the world, hide your strength and bide your time. That all gone now. So-called wolf warrior diplomacy, where they're just very aggressive. Wolf warrior is like the Chinese Rambo. Okay, it's become very popular over there. And
so China has like their like big movie that's like a Rambo.
Wolf Warrior 2. If you've never seen it,
he's like fighting for China.
Yeah, so go watch it, because it is something where it is like Rambo, except it's the Americans that are the bad guy.
Oh, you know what? I saw a preview of it because it's like the biggest movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is, America's the bad guy.
Yeah.
They're fighting against America.
I love that guy as a dad that's like Frank Stallone. Like it's like exactly the same.
Yeah, so like Wolf Warrior 2, or more recently the Battle of Lake Changjin, right?
That's the one I saw, yeah.
Okay, right. So both of those were like, I think, number one in the Chinese box office. I think Battle of Lake Changjin is now number one globally. Even as Hollywood is sort of tanking, China has sort of taken over many aspects of 20th century America. It's got a gigantic, probably the single largest market, all those kinds of things. And it basically shows, again, this all of the Hollywood, techniques, but, the ominous music plays on top of, the American military.
Yeah.
Okay. It is disorienting.
I mean, that's how like a lot of people here would probably like to make American movies too.
Yeah, but that's true. Except the difference is, I feel that when they're made in the U.S., there's also an American good guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
There's the activist or what have you who stands up to the evil military,
that's
right?
Exactly what it is.
That's right.
Stands up to those people storming the Capitol.
Correct. So the problem
puts the rainbow flags on them as a ceremony.
What have you? Okay. Right. Exactly. So. But the problem and solution are both coming from within the house. So therefore, it's like, it's one thing. But when you see it just totally overseas, it's quite a different. That is a different hierarchy, a different tribe versus this tribe.
Like old school America.
Well, yeah, okay, right. So now the thing is, it's worth watching this because it's just getting a sense, a temperature check on where other cultures are at, right?
Yeah.
And this is something which is. I find it interesting because, I mean, for example, most people don't know how China got rich. Do you know how China got rich? Or richer?
Manufacturing?
iPhones?
Well, so that's part of it, right? But like, I mean, they were communist.
Yeah.
What happened?
They like opened up the markets.
But what exactly, like?
No, I don't know. I just thought they kind of.
I think it was like a lot of like bootleg DVDs to start.
Sure. So what happened was Deng Xiaoping, who was a communist revolutionary also, but he was purged multiple times, managed to win power in what was effectively a coup in the mid-1970s. He took over and, without changing the brand of communism, started doing things that were these so-called special economic zones, starting with one across the causeway from Hong Kong called Shenzhen. That worked, and he called it communism even though it was capitalism, okay? And that grew like a weed, and so then he started cloning it across the east coast of China, and more special economic zones cropped up, and eventually, he was able to essentially turn around the country, and he took over. He took power at I think age 78, and most people thought he was going to die soon, but he managed to run it until his 90s, and then he transitioned power in the early 90s over to Jiang Zemin. And then that began. So he was like a startup founder at age 78.
Right.
Okay. Which is, just think about the stress of running China. Okay. Now, there's lots of criticism one can make of Deng. I think Ezra Vogel's biography is probably one of the best on this. But it is. There's also, if you want to, just a quick article. NPR has this article, and it's called "The Secret Document That Transformed China." One thing that people don't get is, when you talk about what communism was, capitalism was punishable by death. Okay, just to give you a sense, before Deng, became the...
And then he made it we're basically going to do it, but we're going to call it the old thing.
Exactly. He had the saying, very famous saying, black cat, white cat, doesn't matter if it catches mice. But before Deng, there's a province called Zhaogang, and there are a bunch of farmers there. And, the communism was interpreted not just in China, but other places, to mean that there wasn't even any personal property or anything. The teeth in your head, they belonged to the collective, okay? So all these farmers, they were basically just starving, but if they kept any grain for themselves, then, the guy, the commissar who's overlooking that district would notice, right? So what these guys did is they did something
worst.
Yeah, it was terrible, right?
That would be the worst.
So these guys these farmers...
They come in and you're looking extra chubby and you're nothing.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So essentially what these guys did, these farmers, they signed a secret contract, which was itself, contracts were illegal, okay? They signed a secret contract that basically said, okay, look, we're all going to take some of the grain that we make this time, and if we are killed for this, then the ones who are not killed will take care of our children. Okay, that was the level. Basic profit sharing and a contract was so taboo in China that they signed this secret document and hid it in their roof. Okay, and so what happened once they had this agreement, all these guys, once they could keep some of what they earned, wow, they had a gigantic bumper harvest. So of course the authorities were like, you seem to have a lot of grain nowadays.
Yeah.
And so they were going to get killed, but Deng raised up his hand and was like, okay, no, we're doing the new communism this time, right? It's capitalism now, we call it communism, right?
Yeah.
But that's the reason that story is kind of important to know is just how insane this stuff got, right? And importantly, the Red Terror, the excesses of communism in the Soviet Union happened in the 1910s, 1930s, right? But there was a lag, and it became insane in China within living memory. In the 1960s, 1970s, you had the Great Leap Forward. You had 1950s, Great Leap Forward. 1960s and 70s, the Cultural Revolution. So within living memory, this thing that had sort of burned its way out through the population of the Soviet Union, which had settled into sort of this Brezhnev, it wasn't as murderous, was just carving a swath through China in the 60s and 70s. Is still very live. Probably people listening to this podcast were alive when people were being killed for capitalism in China. Okay. Now, from that to Chinese tech billionaires in one generation is so insane.
Yeah, that's wild.
That you have to sort of understand what kind of turnaround happened in their society. Just to understand how much of a head of steam they have. They feel highly motivated and what have you.
They're cooking
they're trying to catch up.
Well, they're trying to catch up. They also,
or take over.